Hi everyone, Tiffany here from Tiffany Gordon Cosplay, and on this episode of Tiff's Tips videos, we're going to be going over how I made my Victorious Jana boot covers from League of Legends. I first got reference images from League of Legends using their art version of Victorious Jana. And then I made a template, wrapping my leg in saran wrap and covering it with masking tape, and then I drew on my pattern with a Sharpie. I then cut out my pattern and traced it onto 4mm EVA foam, and then used a Sharpie to trace on all of the detail pieces. Next, I cut each piece out using an Excel blade, and then, using the Excel blade, I pierced halfway through the EVA foam around all of the detail areas. And after, I then used a heat gun to open up all of the detail areas as well as to heat treat the EVA foam. This process makes the EVA foam look like it's been engraved. Next, I worked on the kneecap. I applied contact cement glue to the kneecap to the edges of the pieces, and then let fully dry, and then attached the detail piece to the edge of the kneecap. I then used a sanding drum with my Dremel to round all of the edges of the kneecap. For the leg covering part of the boot cover, I applied contact cement glue to each of the edges, let fully dry, and then attached to make one piece. And again, for all of the detail pieces, I used a sanding drum to make a triangle-like shape to each of the pieces. And for attaching all of the detail pieces, I once again applied contact cement glue and let dry. And once it was dry, I then attached together. I did the same exact process to attach the kneecap to the leg part as well. Now to talk about how I attach the boot cover to my actual leg. I first cut a strip of 2mm EVA foam using an Excel blade. You want the strip to be long enough where it'll cover your full length of the boot cover, as well as you want it to be wide enough to go underneath the boot cover on the opposite side. I then used a heat gun to heat treat the specific piece, and then applied contact cement glue only to the spot that was going to attach to the boot cover. And you can see here what it looks like after it's been attached. Now that the construction of the boot covers are done, it's time to start painting. As always, when I work with EVA foam, I applied 3 heavy coats of Plasti-Dip to the entire surface of the boot covers. And once the Plasti-Dip was dry, I then masked off areas to prep for painting. Normally, when airbrush painting metallics, I would start with a black airbrush color as a base coat, but because my Plasti-Dip was black, we're just gonna skip to painting. And the first coat that I used was Testors Silver Airbrush Paint, using a little bit of Airbrush Flow Improver. And once the paint was dry, I then removed all of the masking tape, and followed by masking off all of the silver painted areas using masking tape and paper. I then used gold Testors Airbrush Paint for the rest of the pieces. And once all the paint was dry, I removed all the masking tape and paper. Now for my favorite part, by adding black airbrush paint to all of the crevices to create shadows. And to give more depth to all of our engraved areas, I applied a heavy coat of black airbrush paint to a small section at a time. And while the paint is still wet, I used a paper towel to remove all of the paint from the top surface. This will leave all of the black paint in the crevices. I do recommend only doing this process in small sections at a time, otherwise your paint might dry faster than you can wipe it off. And you can see here what it looks like once it's done. And to add even more of a pop to your pieces, I like to go back by hand and use acrylic paint for golds and silvers and add a little bit more highlights to the piece. The final step with the painting process was to do a heavy coat of satin clear enamel spray paint to the entire piece and let dry. Once the piece was dry, I then used a heat gun to lightly heat up the EVA foam to bend it to the shape that I wanted. Big warning though, if you did not use airbrush paint, do not do this process because your paint will then bubble. As also, do not overheat or your piece will start to crack and bend and do weird stuff. Now for more of the attachment process. I cut male and female strips of Velcro the length of the boot cover. I then traced the shape of the Velcro where I was going to attach it on the boot covers, and then applied contact cement glue to both the Velcro backside and the boot cover and let fully dry before attaching. I will note that most Velcro does come with an adhesive on the backside. It does not work whatsoever, so I would recommend using contact cement glue to attach it. And here is with it fully attached. Other ways for attachments are you can do zippers or magnets, but I personally find Velcro to work the best for me. And that is how I made my boot covers for my Victorious Jana cosplay from League of Legends. Thanks guys for watching this episode of Tiff's Tips videos, and I hope you enjoyed it, and if so, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Much love!